delivered it to each building, and the principals each led their own task forces and created individual reentry plans, which had many, many commonalities, but also needed to address individual building needs. So in that plan, just so you have the big picture of what our reopening plan was and what we're still working under, we brought back all of K-5 for the morning. So this is a picture of an elementary classroom, our class sizes. This is where I think the fortunate part of a system like Concord, we had relatively small class sizes and really well-sized classrooms. And since I know who my audience is here, districts with bigger classrooms have been able to get more kids back, right? That's just easy to figure out that would be the case. We put desks 6 feet apart, nose to nose. They're not, if you measure the edge of the desk to the edge of the desk, it's not 6 feet, but the middle of the desk to the middle of the desk. So this is 18 students in this elementary classroom. We had some that were a little smaller, and we had some that were a little bigger, and we had to relocate them often. So part of why the kids are only coming in the morning is because we've had to take the art space, the music space, sometimes the library space. We've repurposed the cafeteria for special ed work that is not conducive to the small rooms they usually have. And so our kids are in for 3.5 hours. They go home for lunch. And then in the afternoon, they do 2 hours of remote learning with our teachers. There's a small subset that stays all day, high needs, special education, and our METCO students, because we can't get them back to the city and online in time. So they stay all day with us. So this was our plan. It's worked probably better than we thought. There's just a magic mix of having kids in the building every single day. We are not counting on remote learning on alternate days like we are at the older grades. I'll get to that in a few minutes. Having them in every day, putting all the core academics in the morning has been incredibly successful. In the afternoon, they do specials, they do small group work, they have a class meeting. And what we've done by doing this is avoided the most challenging parts, COVID-related, lunch, recess, travel through the school for specials, or a specialist trying to see every student in the building. We're avoiding all of that. So that's what that looks like. I'm gonna just keep going here. You'll see the kids are gonna start to enter as I show you more photos. I've started with elementary. This is another classroom in one of our other schools. It's a little bigger classroom, actually. This is one of our newest, this is our newest elementary school. You can see well set up for normal learning. We don't normally have kids at elementary school in desks like this, rows of desks. We worried a lot about that in terms of instruction. We're making it work. I have to say the teachers are definitely making it work. Things we didn't factor in was the fact that a 5-year-old, and I'll get to a kindergarten class in a minute, thinks a desk is a pretty grown-up thing to get, and they're pretty excited. We forgot to factor in what they would think. And we're still finding the younger kids will talk across these distances. The older kids don't as much, but these younger kids are not necessarily as prohibited as we expected they might be by the distance. Obviously, group work and things like that are challenging, and that's some of what we're doing on Zoom later in the day. Another elementary classroom set up at 6 feet. This is the third of our 3 schools. All our schools are about 430 kids each. Trying to have some fun with it. This is a kindergarten classroom, trying to give it a little bit of a theme. And they have all their individual supplies at their desks, which is not usually how we do that either. Usually things are shared. We've not gone that route, obviously, to minimize shared exposures. It's worth noting, I think, especially since we're talking space this morning, we had extensive work to do across multiple spaces. This is a nurse's office at one of the elementary schools. Having to put in this whole system that allows for the airflow to be negative pressure based. What's really interesting is because our community has been very compliant, we have very few kids in these nurses' classrooms. People are just staying home. Point of reference, in Concord and Concord Carlisle, we've had 15 cases in the schools, staff and students. No school transmission, which is incredibly important to say. Many of them have already been quarantined once they test positive because the exposure was known and identified. So what we thought was going to be high level of traffic in the nurse's office has actually grown to be almost no traffic in the nurse's office. And they are doing an incredible amount of paper chasing and contact tracing and managing negative test results, because we do have every student and staff who has any symptoms of COVID, which you can imagine is pretty common, has to get a negative result. So the nurse's office has changed substantially, but this is one of two spaces because they did have to identify a COVID waiting space and a non-COVID other purpose. Here's with some children in it. This is a 5th grade class. You can see how that starts to feel once the kids fill out. They all get their own space and use their desks. Backpacks, in some cases, one school chose to have the backpacks on the desk. The other school is using the cubby space in the hallway and having to space kids out to go out there. So storage has been a discussion, certainly at the lower grades, and how they're going to manage their things. Another classroom with younger kids. You can see they've got their own personal little container of some kind, mostly plastic, where they keep all of their own materials. And again, the kids are responding really well to this. Not that we're going to go back to this because it's not preferred, but we're doing better than we thought, especially for the little kids. I do think there's probably some benefit to the fact that 3.5 hours of this is enough rather than trying to keep them in all day. We expect that might have gotten to be a little more of a challenge. Another elementary classroom, this is 4th grade. You can see teachers are staying, for the most part. We've had a lot of talk of this, especially as we got some cases. Teachers are really working harder at the 6 feet. I think once you get a COVID case and you realize contact tracing's really empowered for the individual as an adult about how close you're going to get to kids. I do see teachers staying a lot more at the front of the room, because then if a case happens, they are not part of that contact tracing, because 6 feet is such an important number. Again, challenging, but better than we expected it to be. Kindergarten, you need some movement breaks. I was lucky enough to catch this kindergarten class up for an individual movement break at the side of their desk. They're twirling and there's music going and all sorts of good stuff, and gets them up and moving a little bit. So we're glad the 6 feet allows for this. Pretty important that happened. Another 4th grade class, you can see technology is a huge part of what we're doing. We've provided individual devices to all of kindergarten through grade 12. Not what we normally have done. K-5 has not been one-to-one prior to COVID, but we learned in the spring that telling the families to share and all of that was not going to work if we had every student home in the afternoon, and the middle and high school kids are alternating days. And so to have a whole family home and not one-to-one devices was going to be a challenge. This is the day they distributed the devices, and I'm getting a round of applause for that. So I can imagine it was a hit. Same day, another group pretty excited to get their device, and it's gone really well with even young kids on their own device. We're pretty impressed with what they're managing to do, all the way down to kindergarten. I mean, just put your head on the 5-year-olds carrying the laptops back and forth. This is what we're hoping to continue to evolve to, is that we're not just at the desk, but there's individual space for creation. And this is a STEAM activity that a teacher did, and really just letting them go and create and do more of what we're used to doing. So that's part of our vision for the second half of the school year, really helping teachers to see ways to get creative like this. Another project in that same room. I can't stress enough the importance of the outdoor space through all of this. This is a tent at one of the elementary schools. We've had tents at all of the schools. Unfortunately, the weather's turning and they're all coming down next week because snow loads and tents are not going to cooperate with us, but they're a really big, important part. You'll see as I get to the secondary schools in a minute, there's been even more extensive things happening outside. It just gives us a whole nother set of options with less risk attached. I think this is my last elementary slide. So we actually are hosting a childcare program in the afternoon, so working families have a full day option. This is what remote physical education looks like when they're standing in front of the computer and the gym teachers showing them the physical activity to do when they get up and do it. So this is part of a cafeteria that's repurposed so that the Concord Recreation staff can use it in the afternoon. That's, I think, been part of our success, is about 60 kids at each school stay all day. We can manage that. We can't manage all 400 in some of them. So it's kind of found a little bit of middle ground for us. This is shifting over towards our middle school. Our two middle schools are our oldest schools. We're actually in feasibility and schematic design to build a new school, hopefully. Not funded yet, but we're making our way to that. I would absolutely stress the older schools proved to be more challenging, and I empathize with my colleagues in different districts who only have older schools. The elementaries, the oldest one is 15 years old. This is a 1960s middle school. I actually have two middle school buildings, long story, but very similar in their space. They're different in their space challenges and similar with the datedness to them. So this is the cafeteria. Kids 6 feet apart, all facing the same direction. We have, you know, your more traditional tables that we would want and have enjoy groups of kids sitting together. So this has a very different feel to it. It's working, but it's not what lunch used to be by any stretch. It's much more subdued. The older kids have really had, I think, behavioral and social changes beyond what we expected. Positive in that they're following the safety rules to the letter of the T of the law for us, but it has a very different energy than normal, and we've grown to get used to that, but it's not the active places that we're used to with the kids kind of buzzing. So this is a classroom in one of those middle schools. We have a hybrid model going at middle and high school. We have two cohorts. Monday, Thursday is one cohort, Tuesday, Friday is the other. Middle school kids are remote on Wednesday. High school kids are alternating Wednesdays, all half days on Wednesdays for teacher time. Pretty straightforward. You know, there's 10 to 12 kids in the room spread 6 feet apart. I do have live streaming happening in the middle and high school, so kids at home are actively part of the classroom at all times. So you can see on the projector there, the kids on Zoom that are zooming in from their home. And that's a combination of the other half of the hybrid group and any kids who are fully remote. We're at about 11% fully remote kids based on family choices. In the elementary schools, that's a whole separate group of kids with different teachers. In the middle and high school, they just become part of the crowd and stream right in all throughout as if they were part of the hybrid. They just never actually come in person. That part's gone really well. I think the zooming in has been the equivalent to the 5 days a week at elementary. The zooming in has been the mainstay of how we're moving instruction every single day. Very little asynchronous work going on. The kids I met with some high school kids yesterday. They're actually hoping for a little more asynchronous work because of the Zoom fatigue factor, which we're going to try to work on balancing. But teachers are doing new content, not at the same pace. We're telling families we're not doing everything, but we're doing what's important. And I give my staff a lot of credit. The figuring out how to teach to kids at home and in person is a lot to figure out and takes a lot of prep. And they all say they feel like first-year teachers. So we're all a day at a time on some of all the changes to this. Then, a few more photos, similar setups in other classrooms. This is an art room. So they've spread 6 feet apart. They are doing projects, albeit not all of the ones they normally do. Much more contained materials, not sharing things, etc. This is a science classroom, similar in, we're still trying to maintain the labs and hands-on piece. The teachers have allowed that for both cohorts, and that is often where we have some asynchronous work going on while they swap cohorts. We're trying to maintain as much of the integrity of the programs as possible is generally really key for us, especially the more active, engaging learning activities. This is a classroom at our high school. Same schedule as the middle school with 10 to 15, more like 10 to 12, occasionally a 15, depending on the numbers. This, I would stress, is probably one of my biggest examples of changes we had to be made. This is this incredibly beautiful common, learning commons, we call it, in our high school, right at the main entry. Normally, this is full of soft furniture and tables, and we have open campus, so it always felt to most of us that it was almost a collegiate environment because the kids are hanging there, they eat lunch there. It flows into the library, which is behind the glass there, and they can work there. That's where they spend studies. And you can see what it is now. It's one big feral, individual kids. We still, they are allowed to eat lunch here, but we find they're often just eating and working at the same time. It's so different. And it's good in a way that it's compliant with what we need them to do, incredibly compliant, but the heart of the school is no longer vibrant, and that's been really hard for us. We're glad to be in, but it's probably felt like one of the greatest losses for us. So keep designing these spaces. You know, we're going to put it back as soon as we possibly can. Outdoors, I just want to be sure to stress again and again, the outdoor options have been just so important. This is our 9th grade orientation we ran right as school opened. The only way to have this number of kids present was to do it this way. And then they went into small groups and toured the school. But I think probably we're seeing outdoor spaces far more valuable than we did before, now that we learned how to use it better. This is lunch. We're transitioning away from this as the weather changes, but we've been really promoting outdoor eating as much as possible. We're a little challenged to have them stay 6 feet apart, so we started putting chairs out, which actually took care of it really easily. We don't know why we didn't think of it earlier, but we pushed that. We just started having the kids come in last week. Pictures, basics like picture day we did outside. We just didn't want to manage the indoor piece of that. So again, I think as many outdoor options as possible. We're so grateful our campuses are so lush and widespread. And then my last one is really been a highlight for us. Our theater teacher was determined. We've run as many extracurriculars as we possibly could, whether in person or virtual. And our theater teacher was determined to put on a production this fall. So we took that amphitheater you saw the kids eating at, and we actually put a stage outside, and they actually performed outside at the end of October, and it was just awesome. It felt a little normal, and it just invigorated all of us to see our stage lit up where they've been dark since March. I've talked to the kids who were part of this. What a game changer for them to have something like this to participate in. So we were inspired to see what else we can come up with to do outside, maybe in the spring. So that's an overview. It's been a really great start for us here. Not easy, tons and tons of work, but overall successful and positive, and the parent community and such has indicated that via our surveys. Our teachers are working really hard. They're tired. So our long-term concerns are the sustainability of it, and hopefully the breaks coming up will help that.
Yeah, thank you so much, Laurie. I know I have a bunch of questions, but before we dive in on those, we're also gonna hear from Essex Tech. And Shannon, I do have your slides, so I'm gonna share the screen.
Okay, great, thank you.
And you tell me when
Sure.
you want me to advance.
Sure.
Okay, I think everybody can see that.
Okay.
Is that working, or did I lose people?
Nope, we're good. We're good. Sorry about that. All right. So Bob, you can move to the second slide.
Okay.
So at Essex North Shore, so we are an agricultural and technical school. So we only have grades 9 through 12. We are very fortunate that our building is only about 7 years old. So we do have lots of really large learning spaces, which made our re-entry a little bit easier than I think as Lori mentioned, for folks that have an older building. So we have basically a hybrid model where we have half of our students coming in 2 days a week and half of the students coming in 3 days a week. And we've split it up by grades. So we have one grade that comes in for all of their academic classes, and we have one grade that comes in for their CTE. While those students are in class, the other 2 grades are learning remotely. So because of the nature of a technical school, we were able to have a full grade of students in their career tech areas and then a full grade in their academic classes. So we didn't have to split academic classes. We did take some larger classes and make them a little bit smaller and divide them up into 2 separate rooms with 2 separate teachers. We also had to shift some rooms around based on the size of the class and tried to make sure that the room would accommodate the number of students that were in that class. So we found that the every other day schedule provided some structure and accountability. We found that in the spring, when we were completely remote and largely asynchronous, we had lots of kids kind of sleeping all day and then up all night and trying to email teachers in the middle of the night and then waiting until the next day for a response. So that sort of lag time between communications didn't really work. So we were hoping that the regular pattern of coming to school, not like a week on and week off, but the regular every other day would be beneficial for structure. This also allows students to see their peers, to see their teachers, meet with counselors if they need to. And as a technical school, it was important that we provided time in their technical programs. So I also have some pictures to show. So if you want to go to the next slide, please. So these are our hallway setups. So we used to have sort of these really nice collaborative workspaces in our hallways that had sofas and tall top tables with tall chairs where students could meet with teachers or meet together in groups, sort of step outside the classroom a little bit into the hallway to do work. Unfortunately, we've had to remove all of that furniture for now. It's in storage and we hope to put it back into the hallways eventually, but we wanted to have as much open space as possible. We did put stanchions up in the hallways, so the kids have to walk on the right-hand side of the hall to keep them at least a little bit distant. This is an academic hallway, so where there's only one grade in these classrooms, there's less traffic in the hallway. We've also seen a lot less traffic just with kids leaving class or traveling throughout the building. There's only traffic at passing time, and even that is lighter than normal. Next slide, please. Our classroom setups look similar to the Concord Carlisle classes. Our desks are 6 feet apart. This is a standard size class. There's about 16 seats in this classroom, and we allotted for about 10 feet of space from the whiteboard to the front of the first desk, so the teacher can kind of freely move throughout the front of the room. We also have a lot of classes that have two teachers, a general education teacher and a special education teacher. So we wanted to provide adequate room for both teachers to be sort of in the front. There's not a lot of milling about the room. The teachers try to like circulate as they can, but they don't want to spend a lot of time too close to the students. So it's a challenge for the teachers. They want to be able to get in there and sort of help the kids, look at the computers with the kids, but that's a challenge. We don't have students Zooming in or coming in online to live classes. So our teachers either have a live group in front of them or they have a group at home remotely. So we don't do both at the same time. Our students that have opted for a fully remote model, there's only about 60, which is about 4% of our population, and they are doing a full online version of their year through Edgenuity, which is an online platform. They do attend online classes with their CTE teachers though, so that they don't lose out on that technical component. These are science labs, so these are much bigger classes. What we did for the most part is we removed the science lab tables because they were so big, and we put regular student desks in the science rooms so that we could accommodate bigger classes. So the science rooms can actually hold almost 30 students at the 6 feet apart minimum. So it was advantageous for us to have classrooms that were so large. Next slide, please. In every classroom, we did set up a sanitation station. So it has masks, gloves, hand sanitizer. When students walk in the room, they sanitize their hands. They take paper towels and spray, clean their desks, and then they clean the desks again at the end of class. This was the original sanitation stations. They're in every classroom, science lab, career tech area, office, they're everywhere. We did also purchase very small spray bottles. They're probably, I don't know, 4 to 6 ounces. And we filled those with the cleaning solution, and we have those on every desk. That way, the students can just spray their own desks and clean them when they're ready to leave class. So that's been helpful. Next slide. This is our cafeteria setup. So we had to get out the old school tablet desks and put those 6 feet apart. So our cafeteria space is beautiful. They have huge windows and it's really open. It's kind of one of my favorite places in the building. Not so much this year. This is a little drab, but it does keep the kids at the 6 feet. We did do assigned seating for lunch so that they have to sit at a particular desk, but that way it's easier for contact tracing. To spice things up a little bit, we have been playing movies on a big screen during all of our lunches so that at least they have something to do. Amazingly quiet. They weren't really talking and engaging with each other. We've also had to use our gym for cafeteria space as well. We also purchased about a dozen of these portable wash stations, and they are throughout the building. They're in some hallways in our academic areas. We also put them in all of our career tech program areas that did not already have sinks, just to cut down on the number of times students needed to leave class to wash hands and have the ability to wash hands close to their classroom area. Next slide. Thank you. And then we also have sort of tried to capitalize on our outdoor activities. We're fortunate in that we have a 110-acre campus, so there's lots and lots of space for kids to get outside. This is actually a summer project, which was our first little step in having kids back in the building. It was a freshman integration project, so it was a 1-week, almost like a summer camp. They did part online and part in class, where they built, or on campus, where they built some boats that they needed to be able to sail across our little pond. So these are some of the students working on that. Next slide. You know, as a career tech school, we have had to, you know, make sure we still have our, you know, career opportunities for kids. And these are freshmen actually learning how to rappel in trees in arboriculture. So again, you know, we're managing with the 6 feet and trying to, you know, keep them outside as much as possible. Next slide. In other program areas, this is electrical. The students have like separate booths, individual booths. So we used to have 2 students to a booth. Now we have 1 student to a booth to make sure that we don't have them in too close a proximity. As you can see, the students are all wearing masks. They've been fantastic about compliance with the masks, much better than I thought they'd be actually. Especially our seniors, I think they just want to stay in school, so they're willing to do whatever they need to do to follow the rules. Next slide. These are students in advanced manufacturing. So some of the larger equipment had to be sort of relocated and moved around a bit to make sure we could maintain the 6 feet. But again, it's working and it's allowing kids to learn their trades. We've also done a lot with technology. So this is actually in that same advanced manufacturing class. This is one of our new teachers. He was trying to show the students how to read a gauge, and he couldn't get close enough to the students to actually be able to teach it. So he used a camera connected to a large monitor. These monitors are portable, and they can move them around the shop as needed so that the students could see what he needed them to see without encroaching too far. And you know, possibly exposing himself to something or them to something. So the technology piece has been huge. And then this is my last slide. This is just an academic classroom. This is election day, and they were watching the states in their blue and red. So again, it kind of looks like an old school classroom. Usually we wouldn't have desks set up in rows and all the kids separated like this. It's inhibited us in terms of group projects and partner work and things like that. But on the whole, you know, we're making it work. We did have a recent uptick in our number of cases. We had been averaging, you know, maybe one a week, maybe not even, but we've seen a lot more in the last 2 weeks. So we actually have decided to go full remote for the 2 weeks following Thanksgiving. So the week of the 30th and the week of the 7th will be fully remote. Our teachers will be in and teach from the building, but the kids will be remote just in case anybody travels, spends time out of state during Thanksgiving. It'll give us that 2 week window before they come back.
That's great. It's really interesting overall to see how education has changed so much, and now we're forced to put kids in rows facing forwards, teacher at the front, but it's working, and it's good to see how, in a lot of ways, I guess from my perspective, how, and I'm sure it wasn't, but how almost seamless this has happened. I know there's a tremendous amount of work that's gone on behind the scenes. Before I open it up to questions, and I want to encourage those two things. If you have a question, please use the chat box, put in your question, and then we can call on you individually. You'll also see that in the chat box at the very first notice there is if you're looking for AIA credits, you can follow that information to get yourself signed up. One clarification and one question I had, I may have missed it, Lori, at the beginning, but it sounded like you have about 11% of the students that opted for remote. And then the rest of the students, they actually fit with the spacing within the school because they're not on any staggered schedule.
Right. At elementary, that's correct. Because our class sizes are 18 to 20 and our classrooms are large enough, we were able to bring them all back, which I think makes such a huge difference with the little kids. We really pushed the limit of that. I have to say, we've cleared everything out of those elementary classrooms. I know Shannon mentioned storage. We have so much in storage, whether it's, you know, many of you probably design these beautiful little breakout rooms between classrooms. Like, we can't use those right now because at best you could get a teacher and a student in there. We've loaded those up with all the furniture we're not using to allow for more space in the classroom. And literally we have kids at the perimeter of the room all the way around so we could get every elementary student back every single day. Yeah, and at the high school, I don't want to know how much I'm spending on storage over there. We had to keep bringing trailers in and use our COVID money to take care of it. So yeah, we've got everybody in. We're one of the fortunate few that have been able to do that.
That's great. And I know you're in very, very different. Yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt, but I know you were hoping to get some urban viewpoint on this, and Matt Malone and Ken Pacheco are on now, so I don't know if you want to give them a couple of seconds or.
Yeah, absolutely. I saw that as Lori was talking. Good to see you, Matt. Please, very good. I'm glad you were able to join us. I know we got started and we heard from, Concord Carlisle and from Essex Tech. That's pretty much suburban and kind of rural conditions. In Fall River, you guys have a lot going on. I know you're in the midst of a new school, but we'd really love to hear, if you're willing to share, what your reentry plan was and how it went. What were the big challenges, even if just briefly?
Sure. Thank you for having us today. I'm sorry we were late. We were double booked. I'm here with Ken Pacheco, who's my chief operating officer, one of the best in the business in terms of logistician, getting things done. And I don't know what other districts are doing in terms of MSBA products, but I got 4 large ones going on simultaneously, and Ken's been carrying that load. So it's good to have him here for this conversation. First and foremost, my colleagues in Concord and up there in whatever town that is. Hold on, Danvers, right? Danvers. I visited that school several times. You guys got great systems, and I appreciate your esprit de corps. Jack asked me to come on. I don't have a presentation, so I'll be brief. We have 10,400 students. We project managed this entire process from closing on March 17th through a phased approach to reopening on September 16th. We opened in, we developed a reopening plan throughout the spring, well, late spring into the summer, submitted to the school committee. It was adopted. Our plan is very intense. It's on our webpage if you want to read it. And we've stuck to the plan. Our plan is based on 6-foot distance. And that inhibits us, but also has allowed us to get as far as we've gotten so far in this crisis. Let me first say to you that my community is 86% positivity rate in the red. So we're like burgundy red, we're deep red, we're blood red. And we're the third highest in the state, and we're still open. But every day it gets harder and harder to stay open because my capacity is dwindling. We post each week our internal metrics. You can see them on our webpage. You can see the in-district spread rate, the community spread rate of our people, and then how many people we have out quarantined right now. So both students and staff, and that is an everyday battle for us. In terms of us reopening, it's been a great, if those photos you just saw, I'd show you the same photos, 6 foot, we're back in rows. It's early 20th century instruction all over again in terms of what the classrooms look like. But Ken and his team have done a great job of getting all the furniture set up. We have stickers in all our hallways around 6-foot distancing for how kids are going up and down the hallways. We've added staff and personnel. There's a real cost to staying open. So the CARES money is something that we've used to hire additional building level support specialists plus nurses and LPNs across the district. Ken and his team have done also added to the maintenance division. So we're getting a lot of projects done to support the changing of earth valves and filters and air exchange rates, things that I didn't know about last year that now I know a lot about. And I think that there was a nice piece on us on NPR, WGBH last week, and another one in the Commonwealth Mag, and we got one coming up in the Globe, I think this Saturday. When people visit our schools and see us in action, they're like, holy cow, it's working. Well, I mean, this is normal, and it is normal. But the model we have is extremely difficult. Essentially, we're running 4 schedules a day. So we had 4,400 families pick full remote. I got 10,400 kids, so that leaves 6,000 kids. Of those, 1,300 of them we identified as high needs, and those are sub-separate SPED and Foundation L students, English learners. They come 8 days out of a 10-day cycle. They come 8 days out of 10 days. Our model is Monday, Tuesday in person, Wednesday fully remote, Thursday, Friday in person. So we have that group in 8 days, and then we've divided all the other kids into 2 cohorts, and they come week on, week off. So on any single day, we got about 3,600 kids in person. And that's about I've invited back as many kids as we can fit. That's all I can fit right now at 6 foot, given the space limitations we have. And there's been some pressure to move to 3 feet, but we're not going to do that. We're going to stick with 6 feet for the time being. In the community, there's also been some community-based agencies that have set up to help us on the remote weeks with kids. We got about 200 kids being served by like the Boys and Girls Club, the Y, and People's Inc., another social service agency. So when you look at across the system, I'm supporting all that remote work for those agencies, plus everything that we're doing with, in our system, plus all the other things that we're trying to do. So no matter what, we're still feeding the 4,400 families that are remote. We're still doing meal distribution sites. We're still doing all of the cleaning that's essential. We do 2 deep cleans a week, plus every day contact cleaning. And then really the hardest part for us right now is managing the context of the spread, meaning the contact tracing. So it's a 24-hour, it's really a 24/7 operation. I have nurses that are working around the clock right now, contact tracing and doing those things. The state has been great, but the local board of health is tough. They're limited resources and they don't work, they work 9 to 5 and don't work on weekends. So we've had to provide all that service support ourselves. And we've made it to Thanksgiving. The goal was to make it to Columbus Day and then Veterans Day, and then we've made it to Thanksgiving. So whatever happens moving forward here, I cannot be sure. I think the winds are shifting. I'm hearing some stuff, some political action by the state teachers union that's going to force our hands a little bit. So I don't know where my school committee is going to end up on the question of how long we stay in this posture. But I feel strongly, and I will never not say that the in-person is the best possible solution for kids and families. We've made it this far. And like I said, if I got to go full remote, I'll come up with something and figure out something down the road. I do worry that going remote just makes people feel good. It's like arbitrary. When you coming back? I don't know. Biden got elected, we're going to be okay. I don't know what the answer is. But I'm waiting for a vaccine, and we'll figure all that out. In terms of your world, your architectural world, and all the building design, we've done an amazing job in old facilities. And so we've run major construction projects in 3 100-year-old facilities while kids are in school. We've managed, we've had to move people to different sites on our remote days. I want to thank the MSBA. Without the MSBA, we'd be in trouble. And we got windows, roofs, boilers going on in 4 buildings. And I got a full, my largest high school in Massachusetts being built right now at Durfee High School. All through this entire process, MSBA has been great. State support's been great. The city support's been great. We've done all the best practices. I mean, Suffolk Construction used us as a kind of a model about how to do good construction in terms of daily temperature checks and all the PPE and the distancing, and we've done this safely. Yes, there's still spread. Yes, people are still getting sick. The community's, as I said, is really red hot. But I'm feeling if we stayed in this mode, we could continue to get through for the foreseeable future. I just don't know where we'll go in terms of your design thinking, as you guys are architects. Open spaces, I think, are going to flexible spacing. Those kinds of design principles have to be critical for the future of this work as we design buildings for the next 50 to 100 years, because we need this flexibility. You saw the pictures, like cafeterias have to become very flexible. Classrooms have to be flexible. Hopefully we get back to what space looks like with flexible seating. But it's the challenges that I'm having with the old buildings is around air quality, of course. We got buildings with windows that don't open thanks to the MSBA. I now have windows that open in 3 of my facilities. The air quality is a huge challenge for us, but it's something we monitor. We've hired expertise in that regard. We'll continue to add maintenance people to get that done. And then outdoor spaces, something that you guys really need to think about, is how can we be much more practical about flexibility with outdoor spaces, whether they have what they call the amphitheaters or canopies or crazy, whatever you want to call them, things outside where you can go and learn. I think those are got to be a critical part to thinking about the future of design. There's always going to be pandemics, and if we're going to move forward in this new normal, I think those are critical, because if we can get outside and do things that allows the buildings to rest, and we can do more cleaning during that time. So I think those are critical design principles for your world. And then anything else to add, Ken?
Well, the courtyard work is the outside, and that's finally the courtyards are coming into play.
Yeah, it's
sometimes
right,
wasted
right.
space.
You guys designed all these courtyards in the 60s and 70s that sat there wasted for 40 years, and now they're our most precious tool. So I know in our new building we got 2 major courtyards, and they're designed for the purpose of education with amphitheaters and stuff. But I think that lighting, windows, airflow, all those have to be critical components. And then the safety part, of course, these nurses' offices and health facilities can't just be in one location now. We should think about how we can disperse those across large buildings so we can have triage areas when need be, and able to build quarantine rooms is something you probably never thought of before in your you're designing buildings. And then how do we create, from old spaces, create these kind of spaces? And I think we've done that on our own in some extent to some of these buildings. So with that, we'll answer any questions, and we appreciate you inviting us to join this august conversation.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dr. Malone. I'm glad you're a direct and fast talker. You just packed a lot into that punch. And it's nice to hear too that the community, the greater community, is part of the solution there in Fall River, with students needing a place to go like the Boys and Girls Club. I imagine that's for the virtual time, but I'm going to jump right to the questions. Just so everyone knows, we are up on our hour. I'm going to go through these questions anyway, so whoever can stay on, and I don't expect that necessarily the educational leaders that have joined us can stay on. I know you're very busy, but if you can, please do. So our first question is from Lisa Quackenbush. Lisa, you can unmute yourself, but you're asking about the communication of the virus to little students, and how do you do that without instilling fear? Does anybody want to answer that?
Bob, I'm happy to answer. Across all grade levels, the kids have impressed us. I know Shannon mentioned the older kids just want school to stay open, and they realize what that takes. The younger kids, it's just become another part of their routine. They don't complain. They leave their masks on. We actually thought that would be a huge challenge with the youngest kids. Not at all. In fact, I was in a classroom last week, and they were having snack at their desks. And so we are very careful when their masks are off and they're eating like that. And I went over to just chit chat. And this little guy looks at me partway through the conversation and says, I should stop and put my mask back on. So I think it's been presented as just a way to stay safe. They know there's a virus. They know people can get the virus. I think the fear factor's been avoided by not necessarily highlighting how dangerous the virus is for some. I think it's been much more of it's just a matter of fact. This is something we need to be careful about. So we don't see afraid little kids. We see little kids just having one more piece of their routine. Really impressive all the way around. So thanks for asking. We were certainly worried as the summer went on, but the kids are rising to this in ways I don't think any of us were sure they would.
There's another question here about whether this is being recorded, and it is. I missed the introduction, but I hit the record button just in time for Lori's start, so we have all of the district information. And yes, we will be able to share this. We'll post it on our BSA website, so there'll be a link. Donna Denisko's asking. Donna, you can also unmute yourself. What modifications were made to HVAC systems?
Yeah, I just know we were involved with working with several districts with the reentry, and a lot of it focused on mechanical systems, which has been incredibly challenging. And every district seemed to have different tolerance levels with their teacher unions, and what was acceptable, what wasn't acceptable, and or just the ability to bring in whether it was HEPA filters or anything. So it would just be helpful to hear. You're all unique, so it'd be great to hear your experiences.
So I can speak to that a little bit. I don't believe we made any changes to our filters, but we did increase our air exchange to the maximum, which I believe our maximum is 15 times in an hour. And so we have like the maximum air exchanges and maximum amount of fresh air coming into the building. That's how we managed.
I can speak. The newer schools, four out of the 5, we had a consultant come in and review everything. So the newer schools proved to not need any attention, really. The middle schools, like I mentioned, are the oldest schools here. They're 1960s vintage. We are constantly monitoring those and put air purifiers in. Every unit vent was checked to make sure it was operational, measured the airflow, and there's an ongoing routine of carbon monoxide monitoring on a weekly basis. Those were actual numbers that are in the MOA I have with the union, that there's a threshold there. We're always way, way, way below it, but very much a a discussion with teachers for sure. For me, and it was the oldest building that was the biggest concern. And we really had to work with the teachers to get them to a comfortable point. Bringing a consultant in who had knowledge of all this and could explain it in terms they could understand was really beneficial, and not just all of us trying to do so.
And that may also answer Sarah Gibson's question, which is, how did you figure out how many air changes per classroom per hour? What metrics are you using to determine whether ventilation is adequate? I imagine that resides with the engineers that you've pulled in.
Yeah.
I don't know if in Fall River, Matt, you described a lot of different conditions. You got old buildings, new buildings, a lot of work going on with even just getting the windows to open. Were you able to have mechanical systems assessed, or how is the city dealing with that?
So we did assess the, actually the middle buildings, not so much the older buildings, because the best part about the old buildings is they're drafty. The worst part about the old buildings is they're drafty. So, the air changes in the older buildings, once we did the monitoring, proved that there was enough going on in there, whether we wanted it to happen or not, that we were okay. We did bring some purifiers in to classrooms that we knew we were going to have issues with. The middle buildings, we did the survey and analysis on those buildings, and we moved the changes of air up to age appropriate changes. So the equipment, we pushed it to the limits on those. Were a minimum of 4 changes an hour and a maximum on those buildings of 8 changes an hour. And newer buildings, so 2011 design, those buildings are 10 changes an hour. The unions worked really closely with us on that, and we're satisfied with the numbers. We're changing filters 4 times a year as opposed to twice. They were pleased with that. We're doing air checks or tests every time we change filters. Just before we change the filter, we give them a test, let them know, start and end on the analysis. So far so good with the unions, and that was the way we handled the 16 buildings.
Thank you. Sarah, I didn't know if there's any follow-up on that, but you're welcome to speak.
No, I think that it answers some of my questions. I mean, I think the metrics of, how are school districts gauging what is sufficient ventilation is of interest to me.
Great, thank you. Cindy Oliver is asking a question, and she wants to hear a little bit more about how you've worked with staff and remote students on technology use and adoption and comfort levels. I know it's probably very different for the schools that were already one-to-one, but I'd love to hear from all of you.
I don't mind jumping in. We were one-to-one at 612. And obviously, I think we rode some of the trial and error of the spring for sure, and tried to tighten up and make a plan that was more thorough and comprehensive and prepared both teachers and kids. Our teachers were in professional development all summer, voluntary, and they were incredibly engaged. So that was very key to our success there. What we tried to then do was do a better job of onboarding the kids this fall than we did. We dropped them in the deep end of the pool last spring and then tried to find our life raft. This fall, we did it much more intentionally, much more comprehensive, and ensured that, we were anchored in a platform. K-12, we are now anchored in a platform. That was not the case in the spring. Probably for us, the greatest amount of work went into the K-5 kids because they weren't one-to-one until this fall. And the teachers are using the in-person time to really prepare them for their remote work. That's taken a little discussion with parents because they don't understand why we're on the computer when they're in person, and we're trying to make sure they understand the work is to make them more efficient when they're remote. And I guess I'll just remind you all that even those of us who are hanging on to stay open, I have a kindergarten class that's been quarantined for the last almost 2 weeks. So you can have a remote episode at any given point. And it's just really important that kids have those skills. So Thanks for asking.
I can speak a little bit about our technology use. We were already a one-to-one district with our seniors with iPads and grades 9, 10, and 11 with Chromebooks. So that transition was fairly seamless because the students were already used to it. We use Google Classroom, and we now use Schoology as well. So we did introduce a new learning management system. And we've provided many opportunities for professional development through the fall, the summer and the fall, to help the teachers become more proficient with remote learning.
Yeah, it is.
Matt and Ken, did you care to offer any thoughts on the technology side of things?
Yeah, we had a huge issue with technology. I agree, like when Laurie said, like this spring was kind of like a disaster.
Sorry, Matt. Could everyone mute if you're not speaking, please? Thank you.
Yeah, I said this spring was kind of a disaster for us. We had some, many students engaged. We gave out like 3,600 devices, but the large majority of kids, was still packet work. And when the state announced we couldn't fail any kids, I mean, there wasn't much incentive for a lot of folks to do much. So it was tough. But when we got back, we spent the entire summer building an infrastructure. We developed our own platform called Fall River Flex, which is the main platform for all of our K-12 learning now. And we bought a couple of programs. I don't know what the hell they're called, but they're good and the kids like them and the teachers are working them. Plus the other stuff we have. But the hardest part was supply chain procurement. We are at a place right now where I could say we are one-to-one. Now that's as of this week. We were one-to-one if you BYOD, bring your own device to the party, and we're still maintaining that. But what we're finding now is I got to also now retrofit for testing, both Access and MCAS, probably another 2,000 devices that we're just going to hold on to and store. Teacher devices is something that we never thought of before. So we bought really nice devices for teachers. All our paras have them now. Tomorrow is actually the first day where we're going to practice full remote from home, because I haven't practiced it yet. So tomorrow's our practice test for that. It's a half day. It's kind of a good day to do it. And we're going to pressure test and see where we go. If we go full remote in the future, our MOU says our teachers are working in buildings. So we're adamant about that. I think the collegiality and the teamwork and the resources, materials are important. So we're all, working still in buildings. But if we need to, because the state gets so hot, we're ready to go full remote and send everyone home, and everyone will have the tools and technology to do that as well. So we kind of we look at ourselves in this, we're ready for anything, we're flexible, we can pivot on a dime, and we're prepared. So we keep doing these testing to practice really, and it's working. But you never have enough money for the technology that you need, especially if you're at 100% that school spending district. So we've relied on some foundation support. One of the key things, though, you guys definitely struggle with too, and both in Danvers, North Shore, and Concord, is connectivity. So we've given out like 1,000 hotspots, but I could probably give out 10,000 hotspots. But I don't feel like it's like an ethical thing. Without connectivity being a public utility, why do I have to pay for it? It should be free, but it's not. So this is, the context of poverty has had a huge light shined on it from this pandemic, and issues of equity and justice are issues that we're dealing with daily. I appreciate my school committee for making some really good decisions on spending to be able to do these kinds of things, and for the community to step up. But it's not. It's a challenge. It's not perfect, but we're doing the best we can possibly do.
Yeah, thank you very much. And That's important to hear. And that's one of the reasons why we wanted to get more districts involved too. Very different circumstances, different communities. Just two more questions. I'm going to combine Michael Key's with Phil Pinelli's, which is basically wanting to mine a little bit more into the kinds of experiences and things you've discovered, and what have you learned that will continue post-pandemic?
My first answer is assessments. The teachers are really moving off of some of the traditional assessments, because if a student's at home, you can't ensure there isn't a textbook next to them and that sort of thing. And I've been really excited to see what they're coming up with. Some of it very technology driven, some of it just different. They've been sharing more and more of what they're coming up with, ways to assess student learning. And they're even naming, this was the exciting part, I think, they're even naming that this is better than what they were doing before. Some of the modes they're starting to utilize. You know, I think every district has that as a long-term goal. And all of a sudden I'm watching it kind of skyrocket. And to hear some of my high school teachers say, you know, we used to make them memorize all this stuff in this world language class because we thought they had to have it. And we didn't do that this time because we couldn't really patrol it. And now we're realizing they didn't really need it. And I thought, boy, if we could minimize the memorization in high school, I think it's a different place. So there's lots of silver linings. On a given day, you got to look for them and hold fast to them, because there's so many other things that aren't so positive going on. But there are definitely some changes that are going to be positive.
So Lori, when you say assessment has always happened, what's different about this assessment?
So they're doing it in different ways. They're asking kids to produce and create things. They're giving them much more open-ended ways to show their knowledge. I'm just watching more and more traditional tests start to not be the mainstay of how we're operating, especially at the secondary schools. And that's fantastic. That's been a long-term goal, and one that I probably think every high school's resisted to a point. And they're just diving in because they're realizing that in this environment, it's a better way. And now they're starting to realize in general, it's a better way. So.
Great.
We're also seeing some of that, where we have some different types of different strategies being put to use to assess students, as opposed to just the traditional paper and pencil memorization type tests, which I think it really benefits different types of learners. And we're also seeing much more proficiency with the teachers in using the technology in the classroom. So although I think we can all agree that it's best for students to be in the classroom getting live instruction, but to use different types of technology to keep the students engaged, I think is a win. And I think our teachers that following this will feel more comfortable doing it.
Yeah, that makes me want to ask, is there a desire long-term to set up relatively inexpensively, but any classroom could be a distance learning lab? In other words, you know, you might be at home, but you could still attend your class. Or is that
the part we're kind of already bouncing around is because one of the things we see a lot is the high school kids do come to school typically when they're sick because they can't afford to miss a day, they fall too far behind. And if there was a way for the technology to offset some of that stress, we were naming a mental health crisis here before all this with our high competitive, you know, this is the Concord piece of my world, the high competition and, you know, high performance demands. If kids could have that as a buffer, I think it would take a huge edge off for them. So that's in the back of our heads. I can't say it's front burner, but, and the convenience of the Zoom, not that we want to do it as much as we're doing it, but it is certainly convenient in many cases to allow access to all sorts of different things.
any other thoughts on what we're learning, the positives, things that might change in the future? They're mostly architects, because we're wanting to hear the $1 million thing. Like, well, if you just built this thing this way.
Right. So I piss people off all the time, which is something I usually do, but I've been saying, like, you guys are building me a $265 million building. You could have given me one of these. This is the future of school. We don't, you know, we should probably create spaces that have performing arts and connectivity stuff with athletic spaces. But the problem, I worry that this learning, the Google and the classrooms, and it is going to put teachers out of business the way we used to think about it. and we're going to become this place where learning happens outside. We become avatars in our little learning world. And then we have these connection points where we come together to do arts and music. So I don't know if we're going to be investing in these big buildings anymore. We would probably invest in these hubs, and then learning happens out there. Like that's some far ahead stuff. There's this guy, DE out of Harvard. I took some class like 20 years ago and he was talking about this. And I was like, this guy's nuts. But now I'm like, I love this guy because like he was really being a futurist. And that's something that like scares the hell out of, should scare all of us, because it's like this disruptive technology, like force right now is going to cause disruption in how we think about investing in. It's like, why are we still building libraries? Like City of Boston, I live in Rosendale. That's what we're investing in right now, a library. Who's going to go to it? Nobody. That's a wasted investment. So if we thought about more connectivity, like these hubs where you can go and do distance learning to the outside of the world with all this technology that you can just access and bring people together, I think that's kind of the future of where education will go. I agree, like what Laurie talked about, this competitive part. Like, I do worry that we're going to, like, we have this disaggregated or differentiated, we're going to, the technologies, some kids are getting so much more and everyone else is getting just this bottom thing. We're never going to close those gaps unless all the kids are getting access to that same high quality stuff. So that's something that I'm worried about. And then the final thing I'll say, are they done? The final thing I got to say, what's going to change? Snow days. I don't ever want to have to stay up worry about a snow day again, because I'll just say tomorrow is remote and just do your work. Because 15 years of being a superintendent, the one thing that keeps me, I hate it, you know. But I think that, you know, the commission has allowed us this year to not have to worry about that. So, I mean, I think this is going to change a lot of the way we think about schooling. I mean, 360, 180-day school year, 12 months. What does it really mean? What does the connectivity mean? And you know, I'm kind of excited about it, but at the same time, you know, change is scary, and all this is change, right? I mean, Laurie and Shannon will probably agree. You know, our professional careers, we were in rows, maybe every once in a while at the table. The last 10 years, we had this huge shift to flexible classrooms. Every classroom in Fall River was like a happy McDonald's park. It was like this amazing place you go in and go nuts. And now we're back in rows again, and it's, you know, everyone's got their device, and it feels like drill and kill, although it's not. But so I think, you know, that we need to just make, like, for architects, the keyword, 2 keywords I keep using. You guys use like exegesis. I can't even pronounce the word you guys use when you're talking design, but like flexibility and flow. Those 2 things are kind of design principles that all of us can say, yeah, that's what we just need to provide districts moving forward, so they can shape the future rather than being confined by the constriction of the built environment. Okay. With that, that is my TED Talk, and I got to go to another meeting. Okay,
we're going to schedule a 4th session. It's going to be futurist, but you have to show up on time.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I screwed that up. It's like, when I try to be my own executive assistant, I suck at it, and I got to leave that to the pros.
It was good to see you. Thank you for joining.
You guys got quite, we're here in Fall River. We're here every day. We got herd immunity. We ain't sick. We're working hard. So you can get in touch with us anytime you want.
Thanks again.
Bye.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut anybody else off. Shannon, I know we're running now 20 minutes over, but there was one more question. I know we could stay on that one for a while. Let's see, maybe I lost it. There's a few more questions now, but has anyone noticed the benefits from schools designed built through MSBA's Green Schools program relative to buildings not adhering to green design? I'm not sure our panelists could answer this. Possibly you can, but you'd have to have experience, you know, designing schools kind of sustainable mandates and objectives.
I could probably give a little anecdotal. I have the high school here is a MSBA project from 2015. The newest elementary school is not an MSBA project, but was designed with green to the nth degree. And those two buildings, when the consultant came through, like for HVAC, you know, he claimed the elementary was state of the art and we shouldn't give it another thought. The high school certainly passed muster with a high bar. The other two schools were older MSBA buildings. So I think more than MSBA design, it's what was current standard. As we're in feasibility and schematic design for a new middle school, we're already pretty clear here that the new MSBA minimums are really rich and robust and very high bar. So, and this probably isn't an MSBA project, but we're using all that as guidance. So it does matter, I think, absolutely. For things we never knew would matter though, right? It's not really about sustainability anymore. Now it's about airflow and things like that, which is always important, but now it's become so critical.
Yeah, and I think John knows this, and most of the architects here would agree 100% too. It's sustainability is so tied to wellness, health, and education that's what we all try to practice. Clearly, it moves the needle. There are just too many studies that connect the environment to improved learning, improved wellness, culture, you know, all these things that just kind of work together to create a safe and healthy environment. With that, I think my eyeballs are starting not to work, but I know there's a few more questions that came in. From Elisa Khan, did any school district invest in purchasing or renting tents? In which I believe most of you have. If so, how and to what extent have they been used? With winter coming, their usable shelf life is coming short. And I know some of you, Laura, you've already spoken to them coming down basically.
Yeah, it turns out that when you rent a tent, the company has to manage the snow at a very high cost. So we aren't going to even attempt to manage that. It's a loss for sure as we get through these months, especially if we get a warmer day in the middle of the winter that we won't have tents for. But we did put tents at least one tent at every school.
We also purchased tents. We actually purchased them and then they arrived late. So we rented 2 20 by 20 tents that we had up for the first few months of school, but we did take those down because we were afraid of the weather. And we have the 2 that we bought arrived in the beginning of November. So they are also in storage and we'll get some use, I hope, in the spring.
But you've got a horse riding arena.
Yes,
The big tent.
One limitation there, the technology outside, having Wi-Fi and connection outside has been a limit for us. I think the tents would have been used more if the computers were more reliable out there, which I have mixed feelings about, but that's just reality in the way we are right now. I think we would have seen more classes out there if they could have gotten on the internet more easily.
Great. This brings our kind of session to an end. I want to thank you both. I want to thank you for staying on, for participating in both sessions. The third session that we have, of course, you're invited, but it'll be more probably architects on the sort of hot seat or on the panel, really trying to share, you know, how we think design is going to change moving forward in the future, what might become best practices, and we'd like to get your feedback. So, and questions on that. Again, just thank you all. I hope everyone has a great, healthy, safe Thanksgiving, and stay tuned for our next BSA K-12 posting.
Thank you.
Thank you.